Last night, I received a message from a 45-year-old woman that left me sleepless. She wrote to me from her bathroom crying after discovering that the man she had been with for 3 years, believing they were building a future together, had been maintaining active profiles on dating apps. And her question pierced me. How is it possible that I, an intelligent, successful woman who has read about psychology and relationships, have spent 3 years of my life begging for emotional crumbs from someone who saw me as a temporary option? The answer to that question will change everything you think you know about male love, because what I'm about to reveal contradicts decades of romantic advice that have kept millions of intelligent women trapped in emotionally draining relationships that never truly nourish them. There is a vast neurological difference between a man who says he loves you and a man who is genuinely emotionally attached to you. And this difference is not subtle. It doesn't require interpretation, nor years of therapy to detect. It is obvious, measurable, and undeniable. Yet we've been taught to ignore this evidence, to settle for diluted versions of love, to normalize emotional uncertainty as part of modern romance. Over the past 15 years, working with women who come to my practice emotionally devastated, I've identified a pattern that led me to a radical conclusion. Most emotionally mature women do not need therapy to learn how to love better. They need neuropsychological education to recognize when they're actually being loved. Because here's the truth no one wants to name. We've normalized male behaviors that are fundamentally incompatible with deep emotional attachment. We've learned to justify inconsistency as just his way, ambiguity as fear of commitment, emotional indifference as gender differences. But when you understand how the brain of an emotionally attached man actually works, you realize that all of that is just a set of sophisticated excuses to hide an uncomfortable truth. He's just not that invested. Let me tell you something that completely transformed my understanding of human relationships and has saved the mental health of hundreds of women. In neuroscience, we know that when someone forms a deep emotional attachment to another person, their brain literally reorganizes. This isn't poetry. It isn't romanticism. It's pure physiology. Neural circuits form new connections. Brain chemistry changes permanently, and this generates specific, predictable behaviors, ones that are impossible to fake over time. A man who is emotionally attached cannot pretend to be indifferent. His nervous system won't allow it. He cannot be inconsistent, because inconsistency with you creates genuine cognitive dissonance. He cannot keep you in ambiguity, because his own brain craves security and clarity in his bond with you. So if you find yourself trying to decode his feelings like an emotional detective, if you live on a roller coaster of hope and disappointment, if your mind is constantly restless because you don't know where you stand in his priorities, there's something essential you need to understand. It's not that your intuition is broken. It's that you're with someone whose brain has not formed a deep emotional attachment to you, regardless of what his words may suggest. This brings us to a devastating truth that few have the courage to face. Mature women, especially those who have been through past disappointments, develop a dangerous tolerance for emotional mediocrity. We become experts in finding hope in crumbs, in interpreting inconsistency as romantic signals, in justifying behaviors that our instincts viscerally reject. This adaptive skill, which once helped us survive difficult relationships, becomes our biggest obstacle in recognizing real love when it finally appears, because we've trained our brains to settle for so little that when someone finally comes along ready to give us everything, we don't know how to receive it. But here's what changes everything. When a man is genuinely emotionally attached, there are 10 specific neurological manifestations that are impossible to hide, impossible to fake, and impossible to misinterpret. Knowing these patterns doesn't make you controlling or demanding. It makes you informed, a woman who no longer accepts emotional substitutes. The first manifestation is what I call total neurological coherence. An emotionally attached man is predictable with you, not because he's boring, but because his brain has created reward circuits directly linked to your emotional well-being. He follows through on what he promises, because not doing so causes him real physical discomfort. He calls when he says he'll call, because his brain's reward system activates specifically when he keeps his word to you. This coherence doesn't fluctuate with his mood, isn't affected by a bad day at work or external stress. It is a neurological constant. His prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for planning and self-regulation, is fully engaged in maintaining the stability of your connection. He doesn't emotionally disappear after physical intimacy because for him, sex doesn't satisfy and reduce motivation. It activates oxytocin circuits that intensify his bond with you. He doesn't swing in and out of moods with you because his brain has categorized your relationship as a zone of emotional safety. He doesn't leave you waiting for days for a response because communicating with you has become a neurological need, not a social obligation. But here's something fascinating I've observed in hundreds of cases. Women who've been in emotionally unstable relationships often distrust this predictability. Their nervous systems, accustomed to hypervigilance, interpret peace as suspicious, stability as boring, safety as lack of passion. We've confused emotional chaos with romantic intensity for so long that when genuine peace arrives, our brains don't know how to process it. But this stability is not the absence of passion. It is mature passion. It's not a lack of emotion. It's regulated emotion. It's not disinterest. It's love that has evolved beyond survival into growth. The second manifestation is what I call complete identity integration. An emotionally attached man doesn't compartmentalize his life. There is no his life with you and his life without you. Your presence has become so fundamental to his self-concept that including you in the meaningful aspects of his reality is not a conscious decision. It's a natural extension of how his brain organizes the world. He introduces you to his family not because you've been together long enough or because it's socially appropriate, but because emotionally he can no longer conceive of important events without you in them. He includes you in his circle of friends not to impress you, but because his brain has fused your identity with his in such a way that excluding you would require conscious cognitive effort. This is what we call in neuropsychology a fusion of mental representations. Your image doesn't just occupy the romantic compartment of his mind. It has an active presence in his professional plans, family decisions, future projections, even in his creative processes and personal development. And here's what's revolutionary. This process is not directly related to how long you've been together, but to the chemical depth of the bond established. I've worked with men who, after years, still treated their partners like temporary guests in their lives, and others who, after just a few months, had fully integrated the woman into their identity structure. What determines this integration is not duration, it's the intensity of the neurological attachment. And once this integration occurs, it becomes irreversible. It's not something he can choose to turn on or off depending on circumstances. It becomes part of his basic mental architecture. The third characteristic dismantles one of the most damaging myths about male psychology. His relationship with commitment changes radically. We've been sold the idea that men have a natural resistance to commitment, that it's part of their evolutionary makeup to avoid exclusivity, that fear of attachment is inherently masculine. But this is only partially true and incredibly harmful. A man avoids commitment when he is unsure of his feelings or when he doesn't envision the woman as an integral part of his future. But when deep attachment is present, the exact opposite occurs. Commitment becomes an urgent emotional need, not a reluctant social concession. His brain seeks security, clarity, and exclusivity because ambiguity causes genuine cognitive anxiety. He doesn't avoid conversations about the future of the relationship. He actively seeks them out. He doesn't shy away from defining the relationship. He wants that clarity. Labels don't feel burdensome. They provide him with neurological relief. He doesn't see exclusivity as a limitation. It's a liberation from uncertainty. This happens because deep attachment activates what neuroscientists call the drive for cognitive resolution. His brain needs clarity about the relationship in the same way it needs to solve a complex math problem. Ambiguity becomes neurologically uncomfortable. When women tell me, "He says he loves me, but he avoids talking about the future," or "He says I'm special, but he doesn't want to define the relationship," or "He assures me I matter, but avoids exclusivity," the reality is clear. His words and behaviors are describing someone who has not developed a deep emotional attachment, regardless of what he might feel on a superficial level. The fourth manifestation is perhaps the most revealing, what I call spontaneous emotional transparency. And this is where we see the most dramatic difference between superficial interest and deep connection. An emotionally attached man displays an expanded emotional vocabulary, with you specifically. It's not that all men are emotionally illiterate by nature. Many inhibit emotional expression due to fear of judgment, rejection, or loss of power in the relational dynamic. But deep attachment completely eliminates that inhibition because his brain has categorized the relationship with you as a space of absolute safety. He communicates his feelings to you directly and specifically because emotional vulnerability with you has become natural, even pleasurable. You don't have to extract information from him like an emotional archaeologist. You don't need to interpret silences, analyze tone shifts, or decode cryptic messages. His transparency is automatic because his nervous system completely relaxes in your presence. But there's something deeper and even more extraordinary. He develops a genuine curiosity about your inner emotional world. He asks how you feel, not out of politeness or to meet relationship expectations, but because your emotional state directly affects his own. He has developed what neuroscience calls specific neural empathy. Your pain causes him real physical discomfort. Your joy activates the reward centers in his brain. This emotional connection is so deep that he often knows how you're feeling before you verbalize it, not because he's psychic, but because he's developed neurological sensitivity to your microexpressions, your shifts in energy, and your behavioral patterns. The fifth characteristic is what mature women, especially those who've been through toxic relationships, value most: integrated, unconditional respect. And when I speak of respect, I don't just mean basic politeness that every human being deserves. I mean something far more sophisticated. Your emotional well-being has become an automatic neurological priority for him. This means that even during intense conflict, even when he's personally frustrated or going through a crisis, even when he fundamentally disagrees with one of your decisions, his way of relating to you remains inherently respectful. This is not conscious self-control. It's neurological programming. He doesn't use sarcasm as a power play. He doesn't weaponize silence to punish you. He doesn't make you feel small to boost his own emotional dominance. His prefrontal cortex maintains control over destructive impulses, because hurting you emotionally has become neurologically unpleasant to him, similar to hurting himself. This respect is also reflected in how he talks about you when you're not around, how he handles disagreements in social settings, and how he reacts when others question or criticize aspects of your personality. He defends you not because it's his duty as a partner, but because any attack on you automatically activates his own emotional defense mechanisms. I've observed something fascinating. Men who are genuinely emotionally attached develop a kind of psychological protective shield around their partner. This isn't toxic possessiveness or control, it's instinctive neurological protection. His brain interprets threats to your emotional well-being as threats to his own system. The sixth manifestation is extraordinarily beautiful, what I call proximity without a specific agenda. Here lies one of the deepest differences between superficial attraction and genuine emotional attachment. A man with superficial interests seeks your company for specific goals: fun, physical intimacy, entertainment, social validation, relief from loneliness. But a man who is emotionally attached seeks your presence because his nervous system literally regulates itself in your company. He doesn't need you to be socially on, to constantly entertain him, to be the perfect hostess, or the intellectually stimulating partner at every moment. His brain has learned to associate your mere existence near him with deep neurological well-being. He seeks you out when he's exhausted, because with you, he truly rests. When he's stressed, because with you, his cortisol levels drop. When he's happy, because with you, his dopamine levels amplify. It's not about what you do, it's about what you are to his nervous system. This need for proximity is not pathological emotional dependence, it's healthy interdependence. His life doesn't collapse in your absence, but it is undeniably optimized in your presence. And what's counterintuitive is that this kind of closeness doesn't lead to emotional saturation. While too much time with someone toward whom there is no deep attachment can create suffocation or boredom, with someone he's genuinely attached to, closeness breeds more desire for closeness. It becomes a virtuous neurological cycle where intimacy creates more capacity for intimacy. The seventh characteristic is fascinating from a cognitive psychology perspective. He develops what I call spontaneous mental presence. He thinks of you randomly throughout his day, without triggers or specific needs. He sees something that would make you laugh, and his immediate impulse is to share it with you. He overhears a conversation you'd find interesting, and he's already planning to tell you about it. His brain has created automatic associations between hundreds of everyday stimuli and you. This isn't obsession, it's cognitive integration. It happens because deep emotional attachment massively expands your presence within his mental architecture. You don't just occupy the romantic part of his brain, you're actively represented in multiple neural centers: memory, planning, creativity, decision-making, emotional processing. His thoughts of you aren't limited to moments of loneliness or boredom. You show up in his consciousness while he's working, exercising, socializing, even while he's focused on tasks that require full attention. Your mental image has become part of his core internal dialogue. The eighth manifestation revolutionizes the power dynamic in the relationship. He naturally includes you in his decision-making process, not only in major issues, but also in everyday choices. Not because he depends on you to decide, or because he's lost autonomy, but because your perspective has become an integral part of his mental analysis system. He's internalized your voice, your way of evaluating situations, your unique wisdom. When faced with important decisions, he automatically asks himself, what would she think about this? How would this affect our life together? What might she notice that I'm missing? He consults you on professional decisions because he genuinely values your intelligence and insight. He includes you in reflections on family conflicts because he trusts your emotional analysis. He involves you in future planning because he literally can't imagine making important decisions without considering your well-being and input. This isn't the loss of masculine independence. It's the evolution toward mature interdependence. You've gone from being the woman he's with to being part of his emotional and intellectual operating system. And this extends even to decisions that seemingly don't affect you, because his brain no longer processes his life as separate from yours. The ninth characteristic is tangible and verifiable. You're a true priority, not a convenient option. This manifests in very concrete ways: how he manages his time, emotional energy, physical resources, and mental attention. He doesn't only reach out when it suits him or when other plans fall through. He doesn't sideline you the moment more exciting social opportunities appear. He doesn't make you feel like you're constantly competing with his job, friends, hobbies, or family for attention. His brain has reorganized his value hierarchy to place you at the top tier of priorities. This doesn't mean he abandons other important responsibilities, but when he has to decide how to allocate limited resources like time and energy, your well-being is among his automatic primary considerations. He stays to care for you when you're sick, even if he has important commitments, because your vulnerability triggers his deepest protective instincts. He celebrates your professional achievements, even while going through his own struggles, because your victories activate the reward centers in his brain. He gives you his highest quality time, even on emotionally draining days, because being with you restores his energy rather than depleting it. This isn't a conscious sacrifice. It's a natural emotional investment. His brain has learned to interpret caring for you as a way of caring for himself. Investing in your happiness has become neurologically equivalent to investing in his own well-being. The 10th and deepest manifestation is what I call reciprocal evolutionary inspiration. The relationship with you inspires him to become a better version of himself, and he generates the same transformative effect in you. But this is not the forced change typical of toxic relationships, where someone desperately molds themselves to please the other. It's organic evolution that emerges when secure love unlocks the authentic potential that already existed within each person. In his presence, you feel braver in pursuing your dreams, smarter because he values and stimulates your mind, More generous because his love fills you to overflowing. More deeply yourself because you don't need to pretend to be loved. And he experiences the same personal expansion, not because either of you is trying to improve the other, but because deep love creates a neurological environment where each person's best qualities naturally flourish. It's as if the brain, once it feels truly safe, can finally dedicate energy to growth rather than emotional survival. When these 10 neurological patterns are present in a relationship, what you experience goes far beyond the traditional concept of being in love. You have what advanced psychology calls optimized adult secure attachment, the most mature, nourishing, and evolutionarily beneficial way for human beings to emotionally bond. The benefits go far beyond romantic satisfaction. Your mental health improves because chronic uncertainty disappears. Your immune system strengthens because relational stress is eliminated. Your creativity expands because your energy is no longer consumed by anxiety about the relationship. Your ability to face life's other challenges multiplies because you now have a solid emotional base from which to operate. But if after learning about these 10 neurological patterns, you realize you're describing something you don't have or haven't had, or something you've been waiting to appear in a relationship that has already lasted some time, you need to understand something that could transform the rest of your emotional life. There is nothing broken in you. Deep emotional attachment cannot be forced. It cannot be negotiated. It cannot be built from infinite patience with someone who is not neurologically available. You cannot love someone into becoming the person you need them to be. You cannot give so much that it finally awakens their ability to attach. You cannot be so perfect that their brain is compelled to reorganize itself to include you as a priority. Sometimes the problem is not that we don't deserve this kind of love. Sometimes the problem is that we've been investing our most precious emotional energy into people who simply aren't prepared to give it to us, regardless of their conscious intentions or kind words. We've confused emotional intensity with depth of connection. We've mistaken complication for genuine passion. We've normalized living on emotional roller coasters because we've forgotten what real safety feels like. Emotional maturity gives us something invaluable that younger women often lack: the neurological capacity to distinguish between what temporarily excites us and what permanently nourishes us, between what we like and what truly serves us in flourishing, between what we want and what we genuinely need in order to evolve. Every mature woman deserves a love that confirms her intrinsic worth every single day, not one that makes her question it constantly. She deserves emotional safety that allows her nervous system to relax, not chronic anxiety disguised as passion. She deserves to be consciously chosen and consistently celebrated, not conventionally tolerated until something better comes along. The love described by these 10 neurological patterns is not some idealized romantic fantasy. It exists, it's real, it's accessible, and it's available to any woman who has the courage not to settle for anything less than what her brain, her heart, and her future truly need to thrive. Your only responsibility is to know these patterns well enough to recognize them when they appear, and to value yourself enough to move toward them when they do, even if it means walking away from situations that offer you less than you deserve.